The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m. just like every other Tuesday. Rebecca Chen rolled out of bed, her feet hitting the cold hardwood floor of her downtown apartment. She had exactly 90 minutes before the most important board meeting of her career. The quarterly numbers were solid, the expansion plan was ready, and after 3 years of building her tech company from the ground up, everything was finally falling into place. She grabbed her phone and scrolled through the overnight emails. Nothing urgent. Good. The coffee maker gurgled to life as she mentally rehearsed her presentation. The investors had been skeptical when she first pitched her idea for an AI-powered logistics platform. A 29-year-old woman with big dreams and a small bank account wasn't exactly their typical bet. But now, with revenue growing by 40% each quarter, those same investors were eager to hear her expansion plans. Rebecca pulled on her favorite jeans and a navy blazer. Comfortable but professional. She'd learned early in her career that being overdressed sometimes worked against her. People expected her to look a certain way, and she'd stopped trying to fit into their narrow boxes years ago. Her reflection in the hallway mirror showed someone who looked more like a college student than a CEO of a $50 million company. At 32, she still got carded at restaurants, and vendors often asked to speak with her boss when she called about services. The drive to her office building took 20 minutes through the quiet morning streets. She loved this time of day when the city was just waking up. The office towers stood like sleeping giants, their windows dark except for the occasional early bird already at their desk. Her building was one of the newer ones downtown, all glass and steel reaching 30 floors into the sky. Her company occupied the entire 23rd floor, a fact that still amazed her sometimes. She pulled into the parking garage at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes earlier than planned. Perfect. The board members weren't arriving until 9 a.m., which gave her plenty of time to review the presentation one more time and grab breakfast from the cafe on the second floor. She took the elevator to the ground floor and walked toward the main entrance, her heels clicking against the polished marble. That's when she noticed the new face behind the security desk. The regular morning guard, Tom, had been there for 3 years. They'd developed a friendly routine of quick hellos and weekend updates. But this guy was different. Younger, maybe mid-20s, with a serious expression and perfectly pressed uniform. He sat up straighter as she approached, his hand moving to the clipboard on his desk. Rebecca walked toward the turnstiles, fishing her keycard from her purse. She'd done this exact routine hundreds of times. Swipe the card, walk through, catch the elevator, start the day. But as she reached for the card reader, the new guard stood up quickly. "Excuse me, miss. I need to see some identification." She looked up, surprised. The turnstile lights were green, indicating her card had been accepted. "Oh, hi. I'm Rebecca Chen. I think there might be some confusion." The guard, whose name tag read David, looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. "Ma'am, I need to see a photo ID and verify your appointment. What company are you here to see?" Rebecca felt a flutter of irritation. She was already running her morning routine, and this interruption was throwing off her carefully planned timeline. "I don't have an appointment. I work here. Actually, I own the company on the 23rd floor." David's eyebrows shot up, and not in a good way. He glanced at his computer screen, then back at her. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside while I verify that information. Our building directory shows Chen Logistics is owned by R. Chen, and I don't have any photos or descriptions for the executive team." The absurdity of the situation hit her like a wave. She was standing in the lobby of her own building, being questioned by her own security guard about her right to enter her own office. Rebecca took a deep breath, reminding herself that David was new and probably just following protocol. "Look, David, I appreciate that you're being thorough, but I really am Rebecca Chen, R. Chen. I've been working in this building for 3 years. David shook his head firmly. "I'm sorry, but I can't let anyone up without proper verification. Our building has had some security issues lately, and I was specifically told to be extra careful about people claiming to be executives or trying to access upper floors." Rebecca felt her cheeks growing warm. Other people were starting to arrive for work, and she could see them slowing down as they walked past, curious about the commotion at the security desk. A delivery driver wheeled a cart past them, and David waved him through without a second glance. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Can you call upstairs to my office?" she asked, trying to keep her voice level. My assistant won't be in for another hour, but someone might be there early. David picked up his phone and dialed. After a few rings, he hung up. No answer. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to wait in the lobby area until I can reach someone who can verify your identity. Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. She was being asked to sit in her own building's lobby like a visitor waiting for an appointment. The morning commuters were starting to trickle in now, people she recognized from other companies in the building. A few of them looked her way with curiosity, and she felt a flush of embarrassment creeping up her neck. This is ridiculous, she said. But David had already turned back to his computer, dismissing her with the kind of polite firmness that security guards learn in training. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant's cell phone. Straight to voicemail. Then she tried her business partner's number. Also voicemail. It was still early and most of her team didn't start their day until 8 a.m. She looked at her watch. 6:52 a.m. She had a board meeting in 2 hours and she was locked out of her own building. Rebecca walked to the seating area near the windows, her mind racing. She could call a taxi and go home to get more identification, but her driver's license still showed her old address, and her passport was locked in her office safe. She could try to reach one of the board members. But showing up to the most important meeting of her career with a story about being locked out by her own security guard wasn't exactly the impression she wanted to make. She sat down on one of the leather chairs and opened her laptop, connecting to the building's guest Wi-Fi. At least she could review her presentation while she waited for anyone to arrive who could vouch for her identity. The irony of the situation was almost funny. Almost. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she watched the city come alive around her while she sat trapped in her own building's lobby, a prisoner of assumptions and protocols. Rebecca glanced at her watch again. 7:15 a.m. She'd been sitting in the lobby for over 20 minutes watching David the security guard field phone calls and check in the steady stream of early arrivals. Each person who walked through those turnstiles felt like a small victory for them and a small defeat for her. She decided to try a different approach. Walking back to the security desk, she cleared her throat politely. David looked up from his paperwork with the same skeptical expression he'd worn earlier. Hi again. I was thinking, maybe you could look up my company online. Chen Logistics. You'll see my photo on the website and that might help clear this up. David nodded slowly as if considering whether this was some kind of elaborate trick. He turned to his computer and typed slowly, Hunt and Peck style. Rebecca watched his face as the company website loaded. She knew exactly what he was seeing because she'd approved every pixel of that homepage herself. The website header showed a professional photo of her in a dark suit, standing in front of the city skyline. Underneath, in clean, modern fonts, it read Rebecca Chen, CEO and founder. The page outlined the company's mission, their client testimonials, and their recent industry awards. David stared at the screen for a long moment, then looked back at her. Rebecca felt a surge of relief. Finally, this nightmare would be over. Anyone can put up a fake website, David said, closing the browser window. I've had training about this kind of thing. Identity theft, corporate espionage, people trying to gain access to secure buildings. You could have made this whole website just to get into this building. Rebecca's mouth fell open. You think I created an entire fake company website to sneak into an office building at 7 in the morning? Ma'am, I don't know what your motivations are, but my job is to protect this building and everyone in it. I take that responsibility very seriously. The absurdity of his logic was staggering, but Rebecca could see the genuine conviction in his eyes. David really believed he was protecting the building from her own building. More people were arriving now, the 7:30 crowd of early starters and gym-goers who liked to beat the morning rush. Rebecca recognized most of them. There was Jennifer from the accounting firm on the 15th floor, always carrying her yoga mat and green smoothie. Behind her came the two young men from the startup on the 8th floor who she'd met in the elevator dozens of times. Jennifer, Rebecca called out, waving her over. Could you help me out here? Jennifer looked confused but walked over, still balancing her smoothie and gym bag. Oh, hi, Rebecca. What's going on? This is David, he's the new security guard. He doesn't believe I work here, and he won't let me up to my office. Jennifer looked between Rebecca and David, clearly trying to process the situation. David, this is Rebecca Chen. She owns Chen Logistics on the 23rd floor. I've seen her here almost every day for the past couple years. David's expression didn't change. Ma'am, I appreciate you trying to help your friend, but I can't accept verification from other tenants. You could be working together. Working together to do what exactly? Jennifer asked, her voice rising with disbelief. Corporate espionage, ma'am. It's more common than people think. Jennifer looked at Rebecca with wide eyes as if to say, "Is this really happening?" She shook her head and continued toward the elevators, mumbling something about being late for her morning yoga class. Rebecca felt heat rising in her cheeks. The situation was spiraling beyond embarrassment into something approaching humiliation. She pulled out her phone and tried calling her business partner again. Still voicemail. She scrolled through her contacts, looking for anyone who might be at the office early. "Look," she said to David, trying a new strategy. "I have a board meeting at 9 a.m. There are going to be 5 investors coming here specifically to meet with me. When they arrive and ask for Rebecca Chen, what are you going to tell them?" David consulted his clipboard again. "I don't see any meeting scheduled for this morning with multiple visitors. Because my assistant schedules those directly with building management, not with security." Rebecca could hear her voice getting tighter, more strained. "When those 5 people in expensive suits show up asking for the CEO of Chen Logistics, will you finally believe me?" "Ma'am, if you're really who you say you are, then someone will come down to verify your identity when they arrive." The circular logic was maddening. Rebecca stared at David, trying to figure out if he was being deliberately obtuse or if he genuinely couldn't see the problem with his reasoning. She decided it was probably the latter, which somehow made it worse. The lobby was getting busier now. The morning rush was picking up and more people were flowing through the turnstiles. Rebecca noticed that David barely glanced at most of them. The men in suits walked through with confident nods. The women in professional attire got quick, polite smiles, but his eyes lingered on anyone who didn't fit his mental image of what a building tenant should look like. She watched him stop a young woman carrying a large portfolio case, demanding to see ID and verify her appointment with the architectural firm on the 12th floor. He waved through a man in jeans and a t-shirt without question, but asked detailed questions about a woman in scrubs who was clearly heading to the medical clinic on the 2nd floor. A pattern was emerging, and Rebecca didn't like what she was seeing. "David," she said, walking back to his desk, "can I ask you something? In your training, what were you told to look for? What makes someone suspicious?" He looked at her warily. "People who don't belong, ma'am. People who seem out of place or who can't provide proper credentials." "And what does someone who belongs look like?" David shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know what you mean, ma'am. I mean, when you look at me, what do you see that makes you think I don't belong in an executive office?" The question hung in the air between them. Rebecca watched David's face as he processed what she was really asking. She could see the moment when understanding began to dawn, followed quickly by defensiveness. "Ma'am, this isn't about what you look like. This is about following security protocols." "Is it? Because I've been watching you for the past half hour, and I'm noticing some interesting patterns in who you stop and who you don't." David's face flushed red. "I treat everyone the same, ma'am." Rebecca pulled out her phone and opened the note-taking app. "Really? Because the man in the delivery uniform walked right through without showing ID. The guy in jeans and sneakers got a friendly wave, but you've stopped 3 women in the past 10 minutes asking for appointments and verification. That's not, I'm just doing my job. I'm sure you think you are. But your job is creating a problem that didn't exist before you started working here." More people were gathering now. A small crowd of curious onlookers who had slowed their morning routine to watch the unusual drama unfolding at the security desk. Rebecca could feel their eyes on her. Some sympathetic, others just curious about the spectacle. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from one of the board members. "Looking forward to the meeting this morning. The presentation deck you sent yesterday looks excellent." Rebecca showed the text to David. "This is from one of the investors coming to the meeting. Does this help establish that I'm actually supposed to be here?" David barely glanced at the phone. "Anyone could have sent that text, ma'am." Rebecca closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She was starting to understand that this wasn't just about one overzealous security guard. This was about something much bigger and more frustrating than a simple case of mistaken identity. By 7:45 a.m., Rebecca had been trapped in her own building's lobby for an hour. The morning commuter rush was in full swing now, and the steady stream of people flowing through the turnstiles had turned into a river. Each person who walked past her sitting area felt like a reminder of how absurd her situation had become. She'd tried everything she could think of. She'd shown David her business cards, her LinkedIn profile, even her company's recent feature in the local business journal. Nothing seemed to crack his unwavering conviction that she was some kind of elaborate security threat. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to move away from the security desk," David said, walking over to where she'd been pacing. "You're creating a disturbance, and other tenants are starting to complain." Rebecca looked around the lobby. A few people were indeed staring, but they seemed more curious than disturbed. Still, she could feel the weight of their attention, and it wasn't comfortable. "I'm not trying to create a disturbance. I'm trying to get into my office so I can prepare for the most important meeting of my career. Ma'am, if you don't move to the seating area and wait quietly, I'll have to call building security to escort you out." The threat hit Rebecca like a slap. He was threatening to have her removed from her own building. She stared at David in disbelief, searching his face for any sign that he understood how ridiculous this had become. She found none. "You're going to have me escorted out of my own building? Ma'am, as far as I know, this isn't your building, and your behavior is becoming disruptive." Rebecca looked around the lobby again. Several people had stopped their morning routines entirely and were openly watching the confrontation. She recognized some faces from the elevator, people who'd seen her here dozens of times, but they seemed reluctant to get involved in what was clearly becoming a heated situation. She walked back to the seating area, her hands shaking slightly with frustration and something that might have been the beginning of panic. Her board meeting was in less than 90 minutes, and she was no closer to getting into her office than she'd been an hour ago. Her phone rang. It was her business partner, Michael. "Rebecca, I saw your missed calls. What's going on?"
"Thank God," she said, keeping her voice low.
"I need you to come to the building right now. I'm locked out." "Locked out? What do you mean locked out?" Rebecca explained the situation as quickly as she could, aware that David was watching her from across the lobby. Michael listened without interrupting, and she could almost hear his disbelief through the phone. "You're kidding me." "I wish I was. How fast can you get here?" 20 minutes if I leave right now." "But Rebecca, this is insane. Can't you just call building management?" "They don't open until 8:30 and my meeting starts at 9. "I need to get upstairs now." "Okay, I'm on my way. Don't do anything crazy while I'm driving." Rebecca hung up and checked her email again. 3 new messages from board members, all confirming their attendance at the morning meeting. One of them included questions about the financial projections that she needed to double-check against the files in her office. She looked at David, who was back at his desk, but clearly keeping an eye on her. The man was like a fortress of bureaucratic stubbornness, impervious to reason or evidence. She tried to imagine explaining this situation to the board members. "Sorry I'm unprepared for the meeting, but my own security guard thinks I'm a corporate spy." More familiar faces walked through the lobby. There was Patricia from the law firm on the 19th floor, who always complimented Rebecca's presentations at the building's monthly tenant meetings. Behind her came the group of consultants from the 14th floor who she'd chatted with in the elevator just last week. "Patricia," Rebecca called out, standing up from her chair. Patricia looked over with a smile that quickly faded when she saw Rebecca's expression and the obvious tension in the lobby. "Rebecca, is everything okay?" "Not really. This is David, the new security guard. He won't let me up to my office because he doesn't believe I work here." Patricia looked confused. "But you're Rebecca Chen. You run the logistics company upstairs. We've met at like 6 tenant meetings." Rebecca felt a surge of hope, but David was already shaking his head before Patricia finished speaking. "Ma'am, I can't accept verification from other tenants. Building policy." Patricia stared at him. "Building policy? I've never heard of any policy like that." "It's a new security protocol, ma'am. Very important for building safety." Rebecca watched Patricia's face change as she processed the situation. She could see the exact moment when Patricia understood what was really happening here, and it wasn't pretty. "David, is it?" Patricia said, walking closer to the security desk. "I'm Patricia Wong from Wong, Stevens & Associates. We've been tenants in this building for 8 years. I've never heard of any security protocol that would prevent a building tenant from entering their own office, especially not one that ignores multiple forms of verification." David's face was getting red again. "Ma'am, I don't make the policies. I just follow them." "Whose policy is this exactly?" "Because I sit on the tenant advisory board, and we weren't consulted about any new security measures." I don't have to explain building policies to tenants, ma'am. Patricia turned to Rebecca with an expression that was part sympathy, part outrage. This is unbelievable. Have you called building management? They don't open until 8:30. Patricia pulled out her phone. I have the emergency contact number for building management. Let me call them right now. Rebecca felt a wave of relief. Finally, someone with authority who could cut through David's wall of procedures and protocols. But as Patricia dialed, Rebecca noticed something that made her stomach sink. A small crowd had gathered in the lobby. People weren't just walking past anymore. They were stopping to watch the drama unfold. Some had their phones out, and she could see at least 2 people who appeared to be recording video. Her company's reputation, her professional image, her personal dignity, all of it was being broadcast to whatever social media platforms these strangers preferred. She imagined the captions, "Crazy woman claims to be CEO, gets owned by security guard," or worse, "Corporate executive throws tantrum when asked for ID." "Hello, this is Patricia Wong from Wong, Stevens & Associates," Patricia said into her phone. "I need to speak with someone about a security issue in the lobby." "Yes, I'll hold." Rebecca sank back into her chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Even if Patricia's call resolved things, the damage was already being done. Her carefully built reputation, the respect she'd earned in the business community, the image of competence and professionalism she'd cultivated, all of it was crumbling in real time. She glanced at her watch. 8:10 a.m., 50 minutes until the board meeting. Even if she got into her office right now, she'd be rushing through her final preparations, stressed and flustered instead of calm and confident. David was watching her with what might have been satisfaction. She wondered if he felt vindicated by the crowd he'd attracted, proof that his vigilance was necessary and important. Her phone buzzed with another text from Michael. "Stuck in traffic. 15 more minutes. Hang in there." Rebecca looked around the lobby at the faces watching her. Some seemed sympathetic, others curious, a few openly hostile. She realized that this moment would define not just her day, but possibly her career. How she handled this situation, how she responded to this challenge, would become part of her story. She just wasn't sure yet whether it would be a story of triumph or disaster. The lobby had transformed into an impromptu theater, with Rebecca as the unwilling star of a drama nobody wanted to see. By 8:20 a.m., at least 15 people had gathered to watch the standoff between her and David. The morning energy of rushing commuters had been replaced by the uncomfortable tension of a public spectacle. Patricia was still on hold with building management, pacing near the windows while shooting increasingly frustrated looks at David. The security guard had retreated behind his desk like it was a fortress, occasionally speaking into his radio in hushed, official-sounding tones that made the situation feel even more surreal. Rebecca's phone rang again. "Michael, I'm pulling into the parking garage now," he said. "This is absolutely insane." "Are you okay?" "Define okay," Rebecca replied, watching 2 more people pull out their phones to record the scene. "I'm about to become a viral video and I still can't get into my own building. I'll be right up." Rebecca checked her email again. The board members were starting to send their final confirmations, including parking instructions and questions about the catering arrangements. Normal, professional concerns for what should have been a normal, professional meeting. Instead, she was sitting in a lobby chair like a defendant waiting for trial. The elevator doors opened and Michael emerged, looking around the lobby with wide eyes. He was a tall, athletic man in his mid-30s who commanded attention when he walked into a room. Rebecca watched David's posture change immediately as Michael approached the security desk. "Good morning," Michael said with the easy confidence that came naturally to him. "I'm Michael Torres, business partner with Rebecca Chen at Chen Logistics. I understand there's been some confusion this morning." David straightened up. "Sir, are you here to verify this woman's identity?" "This woman is Rebecca Chen, CEO and founder of Chen Logistics. We have a major board meeting in 40 minutes and she needs to access her office immediately." The difference in David's tone was immediate and obvious. Where he'd been dismissive and suspicious with Rebecca, he was respectful and professional with Michael. The contrast was so stark that several people in the growing crowd noticed it too. "Sir, I appreciate you coming down, but I'll need to see your identification and verify your relationship to the company." Michael pulled out his wallet without hesitation, producing his driver's license and business card. David examined both carefully, then turned to his computer to look up the company website again. I see you're listed as Chief Operating Officer on the website, David said. Can you confirm that this woman is Rebecca Chen? Absolutely. We've been business partners for 4 years. This is definitely Rebecca Chen, and she definitely owns this company. Rebecca felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Relief that someone with authority was finally vouching for her, and frustration that it had taken a man's word to be taken seriously. David looked back and forth between Michael and Rebecca, and she could see him wrestling with his assumptions. The website showed both of their photos. Michael's testimony was clear and confident. The evidence was overwhelming. I'm going to need to call my supervisor, David said finally. Your supervisor won't be here for another hour, Patricia called out from across the lobby, finally hanging up her phone. And building management is sending someone down right now to sort this out. As if summoned by her words, the elevator doors opened again, and a woman in a dark business suit emerged. Rebecca recognized her immediately. Carmen Rodriguez, the building's senior property manager. Carmen looked around the lobby, taking in the crowd of onlookers and the obvious tension, and her expression darkened. What exactly is going on here? She asked, walking directly to the security desk. Ma'am, I'm David Morrison, the new security guard. I've been trying to verify this woman's identity before allowing her access to the upper floors. Carmen looked at Rebecca, then at David, then at the crowd of people who were still watching the drama unfold. You've been trying to verify Rebecca Chen's identity? Yes, ma'am. She claims to be the CEO of Chen Logistics, but I couldn't confirm her credentials. Carmen's voice went very quiet, which Rebecca knew from experience was more dangerous than if she'd started yelling. David, do you see that woman sitting over there? Yes, ma'am. That's Rebecca Chen. She's been a tenant in this building for 3 years. She pays approximately $40,000 a month in rent. She's never been late on a payment, never caused any problems, and has been nothing but professional in all her dealings with building management. David's face was changing color, cycling through shades of red and pale as the reality of his mistake began to sink in. Ma'am, I was just following security protocols. What security protocols? Carmen's voice was getting sharper. Show me the written policy that says you should prevent verified tenants from accessing their own offices. David fumbled with his clipboard, flipping through pages of notes and procedures. Rebecca could see that he was realizing there was no written policy that supported what he'd been doing. I was told to be extra careful about building security. By whom? Who told you to ignore keycard access and detain building tenants in the lobby? The question hung in the air. David looked around the lobby as if searching for support but found none. Even the crowd of onlookers seemed to have turned against him, their expressions ranging from disapproval to outright disgust. Rebecca stood up from her chair, feeling the weight of everyone's attention. This was her moment to respond, to show how she handled crisis and conflict. Every person in that lobby would remember how she chose to react. Carmen, I appreciate you coming down to resolve this, she said, her voice calm and professional, despite the anger burning in her chest. But I think we need to talk about this situation more broadly. Carmen nodded. Absolutely. David, you can consider this your final warning. Any repeat of this kind of behavior will result in immediate termination. Wait, Rebecca said, holding up her hand. I think David was trying to do his job. The problem isn't that he was being too careful about security. The problem is that he didn't receive adequate training about the building's tenants and procedures. The lobby went quiet. David looked at her with surprise, clearly expecting her to demand his firing. I've been watching his interactions with other people this morning, Rebecca continued. And I think we have a training issue, not a personnel issue. Carmen looked confused. Rebecca, this man has detained you for over an hour and created a public spectacle. Are you saying you don't want me to take disciplinary action? Rebecca glanced around the lobby at the faces watching her. She thought about the board meeting starting in 30 minutes, about the investors who would be arriving soon, about the company culture she was trying to build. I'm saying that firing David doesn't solve the underlying problem. We need to address why this happened and make sure it doesn't happen again. She could see people in the crowd exchanging glances, surprised by her response. Michael was looking at her with something that might have been admiration. Even Patricia seemed impressed. David, Rebecca said, turning to face the security guard directly, I want you to understand something. The way you treated me this morning wasn't just wrong because I happened to be a tenant in this building. It was wrong because you made assumptions about who I am and what I'm capable of based on what you saw when you looked at me. David's eyes dropped to the floor. Ma'am, I know you weren't trying to be discriminatory, but impact matters more than intent. And the impact of your actions this morning was that I was humiliated, my professional reputation was damaged, and my ability to do my job was compromised. The lobby was completely silent now. Rebecca could hear the hum of the air conditioning system and the distant sound of traffic from the street outside. I want to propose something, she said, looking at Carmen. Instead of firing David, I want to invite him to my office for a conversation about what happened here and why it matters. And I want to work with building management to create better training protocols for all security staff. Carmen stared at her. You want to mentor the security guard who just humiliated you in front of half the building? Rebecca smiled for the first time all morning. I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else. 3 months later, Rebecca stood in the same lobby where her morning had gone so spectacularly wrong. The space looked exactly the same, but everything felt different. David was still behind the security desk, but now he greeted her with a genuine smile and a respectful nod. Good morning, Ms. Chen. Running early again today? Always, she replied, swiping her keycard through the turnstile. How's the new training program going? Really well. We had 5 new guards start this week, and they all went through the complete orientation you designed. No incident so far, Rebecca smiled. The training program had been one of the most rewarding projects she'd worked on all year. What had started as a personal humiliation had transformed into a company-wide initiative that was getting attention from other businesses across the city. The board meeting that morning, 3 months ago, had gone better than she'd ever imagined. When the investors arrived and heard about what had happened, they were initially concerned about the negative publicity. But Rebecca had turned the story into a presentation about leadership under pressure, company values, and the importance of turning challenges into opportunities for growth. The investors had been impressed not just with her financial projections, but with her handling of an unexpected crisis. The funding had been approved unanimously, with one board member commenting that the morning's events had shown them exactly the kind of leader they wanted to back. But the real changes had happened in the weeks that followed. Rebecca had kept her word about mentoring David. Their first conversation in her office had been awkward and difficult, with David clearly expecting to be lectured or humiliated. Instead, Rebecca had asked him to help her understand what had gone through his mind that morning. The conversation that emerged was more complex than either of them had expected. David had grown up in a small town where business owners looked a certain way and acted a certain way. His mental image of a CEO came from movies and television, not from real-world experience with diverse leadership. He'd been genuinely trying to do his job well, but his assumptions had created blind spots that neither of them had recognized until it was too late. I kept thinking something didn't add up, David had admitted during one of their weekly coffee meetings. But I was looking at the wrong things. I was looking at age and appearance instead of the actual evidence in front of me. Those conversations had evolved into a comprehensive training program that now included all building security staff, property management employees, and even some tenant companies who had requested similar workshops. The program covered unconscious bias, professional communication, conflict resolution, and what Rebecca had started calling assumption auditing, the practice of examining your first impressions and asking whether they were based on facts or stereotypes. The story had attracted media attention too, but not the kind Rebecca had initially feared. Instead of becoming a viral video about a woman having a meltdown, it had become a case study in transformational leadership. Business journals wrote about her approach to crisis management. Speaking bureaus started inviting her to share her story at conferences and corporate events. You turned a nightmare into a movement, Michael had told her after her 3rd speaking engagement. I'm not sure many people could have done that, but the real measure of success wasn't the media attention or the speaking requests. It was in the small daily interactions that had changed throughout the building. Rebecca noticed that security staff now engaged more thoughtfully with all visitors. The tenant advisory board had implemented new protocols for onboarding vendors and service providers. Other companies in the building had started their own bias training programs. David had become one of the program's most effective advocates. His transformation from the source of the problem to part of the solution had been genuine and complete. He'd enrolled in evening classes to learn more about diversity and inclusion, and he'd started volunteering with programs that helped young people from backgrounds similar to his own expand their understanding of professional environments. The hardest part, he'd told Rebecca, during one of their conversations, was realizing that good intentions don't prevent bad outcomes. I really thought I was doing the right thing that morning. That's what makes bias so dangerous, Rebecca had replied. It feels like logic when you're inside it. The weekly mentoring sessions had eventually evolved into a friendship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to growth. David had become one of Rebecca's most trusted allies in the building, someone who understood both the importance of security and the need for inclusive, respectful treatment of all building users. The program had also attracted attention from other buildings downtown. Rebecca had been invited to consult with property management companies across the city, helping them develop their own training protocols. What had started as a personal crisis had become a small but meaningful contribution to changing workplace culture. Standing in the lobby that morning, Rebecca reflected on how much had changed. The crowd of onlookers who had witnessed her humiliation had been replaced by a steady stream of people who now nodded respectfully as they passed. The viral video that she'd feared never materialized, or if it did, it was overshadowed by the positive stories that emerged from what happened next. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. "The delegation from Portland is here for the 10 a.m. meeting. They specifically mentioned wanting to hear about the security training program." Rebecca smiled. The program had become such an integral part of her company's reputation that potential clients were asking about it during sales calls. What had started as her worst professional day had become one of her strongest selling points. As she walked toward the elevator, David called out to her, "Ms. Chen, I wanted to let you know my cousin just graduated from business school, and she's starting her own company. I told her she should talk to you about leadership and handling challenges. I'd be happy to meet with her. Have her call my office to set up a time. Thank you." "And Ms. Chen, I know I've said this before, but thank you for giving me a second chance that morning. A lot of people wouldn't have." Rebecca paused at the elevator doors. "David, you didn't need a second chance. You needed a first chance to understand something you'd never been taught. There's a difference." As the elevator doors closed and she rose toward her office, Rebecca thought about the lesson that had taken her the longest to learn from that morning's experience. The story wasn't really about David's assumptions, or the security protocols, or even the crowd of onlookers with their phones. The story was about the choice she'd made in that moment of crisis, the choice between revenge and resolution, between punishment and progress, between being right and making things better. 3 months later, she was certain she'd made the right choice. The company was thriving. The building was more welcoming. David had become an ally and friend, and she'd discovered that her worst day could become the foundation for some of her best work. The elevator reached the 23rd floor, and the doors opened to reveal her assistant waiting with coffee and a warm smile. "Ready for another day of changing the world?" her assistant asked. Rebecca laughed. "One conversation at a time.